Welcome to another episode of Black Scholars Speak as we laugh, inspire, uplift, and challenge the status quo. This is Black Scholars Speak. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black Scholars Speak. I am your host, Janelle Gore, and I'm excited to have y'all here today. I'm a clinical psychology PhD student, community researcher, as well as an alumni of the Texas Southern University. And this whole purpose of this podcast is really to be able to connect Black scholarship, culture, and community all together. And so I hope that with this episode, we can really be able to talk about some things that are a little bit unconventional. As you all may have known, I played soccer in undergrad at Texas Southern University. And so my experience and kind of introduction into kind of the academic world was a little different than honestly most students is. And even how I was able to collect experiences in the research space was a little bit different than most students. And so I really want to take some time to talk to that. Hopefully this episode provides enough connection for others to really be able to take information from it. But I do want to talk about the nuance of being a student athlete. And especially whenever you're in your senior year or maybe your junior year, and you're thinking about what does life look like next. I think this is also common for those who aren't student athletes too as well. I think the idea of thinking about what is next can sometimes be daunting, can sometimes be scary. Honestly, I mean, we're still fairly young, right? Like you're 20, 21 when you're graduating and folks are asking you, well, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And that's kind of a hard thing to answer being so young, right? And so I want to have that conversation with you all today. This episode is a little bit different than most. I don't have a guest with me. And so it's really is a conversation from my personal experience and things that I've learned along the way. But to tie everybody in, I would love it too as well if we could continue this conversation. So if you do have questions, feel free in the comment section of the podcast. Let's ask those questions and I will be happy to reply back with some commentary or find a guest speaker that can really be able to talk to more of this too as well. Also, feel free to connect with us on Instagram and we can also finish this conversation over there too as well. So in terms of me reflecting back from being a student athlete to kind of where I am now in a PhD program, I do remember my junior year where I started to think about, wait, I'm not playing pro. I'm not going to be a soccer coach. What do I do? I got my bachelor's of science in health studies, which at Texas Southern, that's basically where they put all of the student athletes in because it's easy enough to where you can balance like your sports and stuff like that. You can still kind of go into the health space. A lot of athletes usually go into health spaces or they go into sports spaces. And so it's still a really good degree from that, but it really also is just a step up from general studies, if we're being honest. And so I started to think, well, wait, what can I do with this health studies degree? What does that actually look like? And so I had a mentor, Dr. Dominique Gwynn, who introduced me to the field of public health. And she was like, well, Janelle, you seem to be doing really, really good in these public health type classes. You might want to explore what a career in public health looks like. And so I kind of took her up on that. She made me aware of different internship opportunities that there are. And that I could do like over the summer, like around public health. And so CDC, I'm not sure if they still have this because I understand with the everything that's going on politically, that a lot of programs for minority students were probably cut. And so this is called the CUPS program. And it basically was where it gave first gen, minority, under resourced students, all of the things, whatever, opportunities to find a space within public health. And so they had different sites. The sites that I was at was Columbia. They also have one at Morehouse. They also have a Howard one, if I'm not mistaken. And then they had some other ones too as well that also participated. I think UCLA, maybe. I could also be making this up. I was at the Columbia one, though. And so during that program, I really learned a lot about public health. I learned a lot about what it meant to also do research. That wasn't something that was really like offered a lot at my university in terms of different research opportunities, which with another guest that's coming on hopefully next week, we'll talk with her about research and HBCUs, but I didn't really get a lot of that opportunity to do that. Like a lot of other universities usually do with their undergrads. They kind of give them those spaces to be a part of those different labs and engage in those different research opportunities. But I didn't really do that. And so this was a really good opportunity for me to gain that experience and just really even learn the language around research and what that means too as well. And so I really fell in love with it. But the trade-off with that, and again, I speak to this being a student athlete at the time, I had to choose from being on the team or going to do the internship. And my coach, even though they call us student athletes, we know that that doesn't really mean that. It really means athlete student. And that's kind of unfortunate. And especially now with all the NIL stuff, which is great. I'm so glad that folks are getting paid for these opportunities. But then it also makes me kind of think about, does it also make us stay in this athletic space when you only really get 4 to 5 years? To really be a student athlete for most, because most will not go on to play pro. And so she made me choose life after or the current, finishing out my senior year. And so what a lot of people don't know is I actually didn't play my senior year because I decided to dedicate my summer to pivoting, to figuring out what was next. And so I engaged in the program and, you know, kind of forfeited my senior year, which I'll talk a little bit about that later. There was definitely some grief with that. And even after you graduate, there's definitely some grief of like not being a student athlete anymore. That period of time that you get to do that is so small. And so it is so precious. But it did allow me to gain a better understanding of who I am without soccer. And I think that piece, the emotional identity piece, whenever sports and your involvement in it shifts, is so, so, so important for us to talk about. Right? Because we're not athletes forever. I mean, you'll forever in your heart be an athlete, but you won't be competing at that certain level forever, right? Most won't. Some will. Some will go on to play pro. But I really had to start to ask myself, who am I without the game? And I do feel like this opportunity allowed me to answer that. I think what I gained was that I learned that I could use my skills that I learned within soccer, playing my whole life, of resiliency, consistency, adaptability. And I could apply that in a research space where I learned to learn that it's much like a game of how soccer is a game. And you have to be looking 10 steps ahead. In the same way, when you're on the pitch, you're looking 10 steps ahead of what's going on so that you can anticipate how the game is going to flow and what the opponent is going to do, and even how your teammates are going to react in those moments. All of that transferred into my now career within public health and now being a PhD student. That mindset, that discipline, that mind shift too of when stuff gets really hard and I want to quit, I can't, because I've learned certain skills being a student athlete. And I didn't realize it then, but being a student athlete, you automatically are learning how to pivot because you're constantly having to pivot. You're constantly being thrown different things, different roadblocks, different situations that pop up, and you are doing those things. But when you're outside and you're in the quote unquote real world, you really are learning how to reframe what pivot means. Because it's not just on the soccer field, it's not just on the football field, basketball court, but it's about life pivots that sometimes impact you far beyond than a win or a loss. And I had to also learn and understand that pivoting for me at this stage, it didn't mean that I was starting over, but it meant that I was just translating my strengths into a new space. For me, it was public health, it was research, it was academia. And so really kind of the takeaway that I hope that you all can be able to take from this episode is that at the end of the day, your athletic discipline, your mindset that you have, it does matter. And it'll continue to evolve as you evolve as a person. And so as we're thinking about what it means to pivot, what it means to be a student athlete, and what life after athletics, after, competing at such a high level looks like, it can literally mean doing that same thing in a different space. So for me specifically, after I graduated undergrad, I had a gap year because I said I graduated a year or a semester early. So in 2018. And I just kind of got some experience. I didn't really want to leave Houston, didn't really want to go back home, which again, hindsight 2020, I wish I did so I could have saved some money, but that's okay. I worked for a little bit in Houston and then I went to go get my master's in public health. And so during that time, and I'll talk a little bit about this in terms of like applying to grad school too as well. But during this time, I went and I used it to just apply. So I used that gap year to really just focus in and apply to different graduate programs. And back then you had to take like the different entry exams or whatever. And so, so I could study and had time for that. If I was playing, I wouldn't have had time. So I also do think, and I'm not saying like anybody should cut their career short as a student athlete. Definitely, I encourage everybody to finish the whole course. It did, though, allow me time to really focus in on those applications. And it also doesn't mean that you have to say like, okay, what's my next step? And I have to do that immediately after. You really could take a break and then apply the next following cycle for any sort of like master's or PhD programs from undergrad if you're a student athlete, or even in general, if you just want to take a beat to be able to breathe while you do those applications. For me, though, I went straight into it. So I went to Rollins School of Public Health and I was able to realize that one, I wasn't burnt out academically how others were. So remember how I said health studies was like a step up from like general studies? In a way, I am kind of glad that our academic advisors like had us do it that way. Because one, I was able to still be successful on the pitch. And then two, and still be able to graduate and get all the things that I needed, even graduating a semester early. Playing soccer is like, wow. But also, when I was going into like my next phase of education, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. I feel so burnt out. No, I had the skills, I had the tools, I had the resources that I needed to be successful. I also had the confidence to do that too as well. Because I was at an HBCU, I just think that that's a plus of being there. Professors really do pour in all of their support into you. And so whenever I got to my public health program, it was fine. I really kind of focused more on those relationship building things, networking, who's going to be the people that are really going to help me navigate this new space. And so then after I graduated, I took a little bit of a gap, I guess, before school, coming back to school again this time, and just worked. But again, all of those skills that I learned from like playing soccer in terms of the discipline, in terms of like the figuring out a way when there is no way, I've been able to apply that throughout my whole journey as an academic now. And so even coming to Tuscaloosa, the University of Alabama, to do my PhD in clinical psychology, again, it just like keeps repeating itself in terms of what I learned back in undergrad as a student athlete to now. Because when you get your PhD, you talk about balance. Oh my gosh, balance is like not a thing for one. I stay like also sometimes, forgetting about meetings or like forgetting about things that are due. And I mean, that's natural. When there's so much stuff on your plate, it's impossible to be perfect. But take a step back and I look at it. Honestly, it's better than most. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be a student athlete to gain these things, but I am giving a lot of encouragement to my student athletes who feel like life ends after college sports ends. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't. In fact, it gets more exciting, in my opinion, just to be able to see how resilient you are and all of the stuff that you have gone through as a student athlete. I mean, I was telling my friends when we were at homecoming last week, I just have nightmares. My stress stream is my coach. We survived that. We survived our coaches. We survived all the pettiness that goes on in a sports team. We did it, right? And we were able to also, enjoy ourselves, hopefully too, as well. And then now we're here. And so we don't have to feel like we have to do these different challenges in isolation, right? We are meant to be here too as well. We are just as smart, just as equipped to be in these high academic spaces. And so you also don't have to feel like an imposter or that you don't belong here either. I will say though, that something, like I said, when I got to Emory, the first thing I was like, who can help me in terms of like being successful in this new space of just being academics? Mentorship is so important. And so for me, as y'all have heard before, Dr. Fayron Epps was literally my mentor. I saw her also apply a lot of the skills that I learned being a student athlete within her work, where she didn't learn necessarily like the discipline, the resiliency, those things from sports. She learned them in different areas of her life. But she was applying all of those different things to be successful. And so you'll still find people in this space that are able to communicate your language and understand your thought processes, even if they didn't play sport. There's so many things that are transferable and so many different ways that you can learn different things. And even in this phase of my life, I've learned what resiliency, what discipline means and looks like in a new way too as well. So it doesn't always have to just stay like the same traditional way that we think. I also feel like for me, my faith has been really helpful in terms of being successful in an academic space, being able to have community. So that's something that within sports, you're given a team. You're like, this is your team. Y'all need to bond and figure out a way to make it work and then make that translate on the field. So outside of that, you're not really given a community necessarily once you graduate. Your job is to foster and build that community. But guess what? You've gained the skills to do that. So, conflict resolution. You know how to deal with conflict when you're on a team. Um, Knowing what personalities you vibe with, you gel with. Not everybody on your team do you gel with. So, naturally things click up or you get a best friend or whatever it might be. So, the people that you're going to be really helpful to you in your journey too as well. And so really the whole thing is that your presence in academic spaces is powerful and it is needed, right? We have so many unique qualities about us. And so we are really supposed to be here. And so I want to encourage y'all as y'all are thinking about making this leap into these academic spaces that what you learned in your sports is really needed. And so as we're talking about going into grad school and to entering into these spaces, we have to apply to get there, right? And I kind of just said that oftentimes we don't have that time our senior year to do that. And so it might be beneficial to apply for the next cycle. So you can really kind of dedicate that time and attention to it, because I'm going to be real and honest. You're going up against students who, when they went to school, they said, this is what I want to be. I want to be a clinical psychologist, or I want to get my master's in public health. And this is what I need to do to get it. And they're getting all of these different research opportunities and stuff like that. So I do encourage you that if you're not able to do that while you're in season, obviously see what you can do in the off season. So that's also something that I did. I started to volunteer at a organization called Forge for Families in Houston. And I was just an after school teacher, but I was able to, while I was there, develop things to help make the program better, to improve some outcomes for the children. And I was able to write about all of that stuff in my applications. So it does take a little bit more of an effort whenever you are a student athlete to be intentional about gaining some of those experiences, but I encourage you to do it. So, in your off season, see how you can maximize your time and space, not just to rest, but also to gain some academic or some volunteer opportunities as well, to be able to build up your resume. There's probably going to be opportunities on campus, but I would definitely encourage you to look at what's going on outside within your community too as well. And because as you are starting to apply for grad school and all of those things, you'll talk about those experiences. And those are really important to have, as well as you should talk about being a student athlete too as well and what you've learned. I wrote 2 essays for my grad applications in for my master's of public health that talked about my experience with soccer and how that connects to the the school to prison pipeline. There's so much that you can really discuss and talk about that really does connect to a lot of other things that are going out in, society, current events. And so the first thing that I would give in terms of advice for when you are applying for grad school is to know your why. So you really want to, as you're kind of pulling all together these experiences that you're gaining while in school, you want to be really clear in understanding why you are going to whatever graduate program that you're going to. You also want to be clear in your why as to why, as a student athlete, you are positioned in a better place than other people. You also want to know your internal why. Why is it that for me, when I was doing my public health program, why is it that I want to work with Black youth and their mental health? And so, again, because we're not only student athletes, I know what it's like to, one, struggle with your mental health as a young person, as a youth. I also know what it's like to struggle with your mental health and being a student athlete too as well. And so those were things that were really near and dear to my heart, and that passion can shine through your writing and through your essays that you'll put together. The second thing is to find your fit. So just because a school has high accolades does not mean it is going to be a good fit for you. And I don't say that to mean that like you can't reach for the stars. Definitely, absolutely, always reach for the stars. But you really want to see things in terms of fit, in terms of mentorship. So what does mentorship look like? If research is something that you're interested in, what research opportunities are there at that university? What is the research that other faculty are doing? Does it align with what you're interested in? If you're not a very like quantitative person and all of the research that's going on is very quantitative, that might not be a good fit. But if you find a qualitative researcher that's doing some really cool things there that really excites you, then that university, that institution, program might be a better fit. I think different from whenever we were looking at universities to play at, or maybe kind of similarly, when we were, trying to go to school for sports, you're not looking at the university as a whole necessarily. You really are looking at it as a program. So each individual program will be different. And even if you go to a program that is, well known, the school might not be like well known. And that's okay. We don't care about that. In the same way too, of how when you went to go do your what do you call them? Your visit, your official visit, and you like met the team and you hung out with people. You want to see what kind of like culture fit vibe is like at the program. Because if everybody is like very out for themselves, high strung, and that's kind of like what you're getting at, well, that might not be a good fit for some folks, right? I know it's not a good fit for me. And so I really wanted a program that was going to be welcoming and engaging and caring and all of that stuff, and not kind of like another competition, honestly. And then also you want to see in terms of like your advisor that you will have, if y'all vibe. So just like with the coach, you want to see if you'll have a good relationship with that coach too as well. The third tip that I have is that funding is key. Just like with sports, we don't go and play for free nowhere. We might if we do walk on and then, eventually get paid. So I will say that. Or if you go to a D3 school, and then I understand that like usually you're getting like academic scholarships to supplement yourself. But still, money is always at the forefront, and it should be. You do want to make sure that you're going to a school or to a program that is going to provide you some sort of financial support. Even if it's not for the whole thing, that's okay. You just want to be able to walk out of your program with the least amount of debt as possible. So that could be things like doing assistantship. So at Emory, I did an assistantship, which they basically call them like graduate research assistants. So that was how I was able to help pay my rent and different things like that. You could do fellowships. So those are things that sometimes are outside opportunity. So right now at my program in Alabama, at the University of Alabama, I am a Roberts Woods Johnson Health Policy Research scholar. And so that helps me to be able to supplement my income too as well right now. But there's different things, scholarships too as well, that can be really helpful. I also want to say loans are not the end of the world, okay? The way that I see loans is that if I am going into a space and I am going to basically like better myself for my future self, investing in myself in that way to me doesn't seem like a bad idea. There's also like different routes and pathways to paying back those loans. And they're also seen as like good debt. So I was still able to, for instance, buy a home, even with taking out a loan for my master's program. I think it's to each its own, and it really kind of goes on to like what your goals are and what you're comfortable with. Also, if you had to take out any loans in undergrad, I think that also too matters. The fourth thing is to care for your mental health. And I think that honestly, this probably should have been the first thing that I said when it comes to like picking a graduate program and entering graduate school. The process is going to be really taxing and grueling. Like when we are thinking about what, again, life is after sports, and am I qualified, having this whole imposter syndrome thing going on. It really is important that we do prioritize ourselves and our mental health. And I know that's not something that we've been taught. All right. Even now, being in my program, after I lost my mom in March, it wasn't something that was like, hey, Janelle, make sure you're taking care of your mental health. It was like, hey, Janelle, just take the W and just figure it out later. The W is the withdrawal. And I was like, I'm not doing that. My mom wouldn't want me to do that. So things that I do is I do go to therapy. So I have a therapist that I meet with bi-weekly. And it really is helping me, not only one with like the grief of my mom, but also just all of the different changes and things that go on in a program. And so that's something also to consider and to ask whenever you are interviewing all of these programs. Because remember, it's not just them interviewing you, it's you interviewing them too as well. How do they address their students' mental health and prioritize that? What community supports are there as well to do that? So like if I can't afford a therapist, where can I go for that? And how good are those resources? You really want to ask us students about how good they are. The other thing is reach out early. So reach out. If you want to work with somebody specifically at that program, make that connection. I am all about those connections. Okay. And so make sure you make those connections early, find those folks early, email faculty, attend those info sessions, really get your name out there so that you can build those connections so that when your application comes across the table, you're set, you're ready to go. In the same way, again, sport, it just keeps making appearances. In the same way, how when you were interested in going to a specific school, you sent film or you emailed that coach or that recruiter, you do the same thing here. Same rules apply. Because if people know you, they are more likely to take the easier road in selecting you because they know you and they know your personality. They know who you are. They know how you play. They know how you roll, you get down versus then somebody else who they got to get to know. They don't really know all that information. Being proactive is always a plus. And then the last piece of advice that I'll give you as I wrap up here is use your unique path of being a student athlete and your identities that you hold, whether it be being a Black woman, being a Black male, coming from lower income, being first gen, whatever it is, use those. Use your own stories. And that honestly is going to be what makes your application authentic. Like I said, one of my passions is youth and their mental health. And so when I was writing one of my essays, I talked about stepping onto the pitch and what that feels like and was able to connect that back to opportunities that I've gotten that maybe other folks weren't able to get. And was able to connect all of that, to the school to prison pipeline and the things that I've seen in my work too as well. So, but whenever I was in my gap year, I worked at a behavioral school and was able just to also see those kids' experiences and see things through their eyes for a little bit each day. All of everything that you've done up until this point is impactful. And you can take that into, honestly, it doesn't even have to be academia, into any sector that you step into. Be bold in that. And so lastly, I do want to acknowledge the grief that comes with this too as well. I understand I've talked a lot about pivoting and a lot about what it means to be bold in your experiences that you have and how exciting it can be to know that you have all the skills in the toolbox that there is. But I also know what it feels like to grieve not ever being able to be a part of a soccer team again, or a football team, or a basketball team, or a track club. That experience is special. And so as we're thinking about what's next and what does life look like after sports, I also encourage you all to stay in the moment. It's something that I wish I would have done. And I think a lot of ex-student athletes would tell you the same. That even when stuff gets tough, even when you don't want to wake up for those 5 a.m. practices, even just like the Bible says, count it all joy. Because when it's over, it's over. So just know that although we are pivoting, and that's kind of, the goal, because we know that things don't last forever, take and enjoy those moments. Make videos with your friends and be carefree if you can. Because it does end and it's real. But also know that you are capable of more than one dream. You are more than a student athlete. You are more than the next thing that you'll be. And then you're more than the next thing to the next thing that you'll be. You are capable of more than one dream and excelling in more than one dream. And so now, as I come to a close with all of this, I do want to encourage and reiterate to you all that your story matters, that as you're going into this next phase of your journey, keep showing up, even when it's hard. And I'm saying that even on the pitch, on the court, when it's hard, on the baseball mound, when it's hard, keep showing up. When you graduate and it gets hard, keep showing up. We need you. And so I sound like a Baptist preacher right now because I don't know how many times I said, now when I come to a close. But I do invite you at this time to really think about your own journeys and think about those questions that you have about grad school and about entering into a new phase of your life. And let's talk about that. Comment it on my videos below, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Instagram. And let's really have this conversation because I would love to know what else I can do to help to support student athletes as they enter into these spaces. Because just like we need folks from HBCUs to be in research, I also believe that we need student athletes to be in research because I think that we have something so valuable and have learned so much in our time as a student athlete that can be really replicated to improving the lives and the health of folks, period, within these academic spaces. And I think that they need us. And more than ever, because things are changing and pivoting so much, they need our innovation and they need our dedication and our discipline. So if you're not already, follow us on social media at Black Scholars Speak with one S on Instagram. Also, we're on YouTube too as well, where you can watch these videos, as well as Spotify and Apple Music. So as I close, keep shining, keep striving, keep speaking your truth because your voice matters. All right? And I will talk to you all next time. See y'all later. Bye.